Hello, this is Winston Cunningham. It is September 22nd in 2025. I want to talk about creation continues. And before I start talking about that, I want to suggest that you, as a part of this, watch Daniel Condren's talk on oneness. It's on YouTube, and there's a link to it in the list of videos that I liked on my YouTube channel, which is The Next Step, Winston Cunningham. Okay, creation continues. You know, I grew up in a religion, and of course they taught that God created everything in 6 days. And it was presented as some sort of magic thing. And of course, I understand now there's no such thing as magic. So the Bible actually tells the story of the creation, but it's coded in language of mind. And that's why most people don't know how to relate to it, and I wouldn't either if I hadn't gone to the School of Metaphysics and learned about the language of mind and the structure of mind. Everything is related. So, as Daniel Condren will explain to you, and I won't go tread on his territory, we began as one. And he explains how we expanded out and into these physical bodies, and so an opportunity to have experience and get acquainted with the 144,000 different parts of ourselves. Starting with the 12 major aspects represented by the disciples, and a lot of references to number 12. We've come through the creation process. Started with gases. That was the first day. Solids was the second day. Plants was the third day, and that's where the nervous system was developed. And then the fourth day was animal, and then the fifth day is animal man, and we are still in the period of time, or period of development, not time, but the period of development called reasoning man, which is the fifth day of creation. And the next day that we're preparing for is the age of intuition. And many, like myself, have studied and done enough concentration exercises and so forth to develop ourselves to where we're operating more and more off of intuition. And in an earlier talk, so that you don't get confused, the gut feeling is a physical only thing, like an animal. Intuition comes from the subconscious mind, the own soul. So don't confuse the two. If you have the two confused, then first thing to do is to separate the two out so you can get a clear definition of each. And so you have that difference, and then you can integrate the new understanding. That separate, identify, admit, and then integrate. That's the process. So we are all in the fifth day. That's where we are. And you can look at each person and see where they are in their awareness of their own development. And this is increasing, but at this point in time, still most of the world is oblivious to what I'm talking about. The not because they don't have the capability, it's because they are ignoring the process. And largely responsible for the ignorance that's caused from ignoring is religion. Because religion builds limitations. The truth is, we are all unlimited. We're only limited to the extent that we've instituted limitations. And I've overcome a lot of my limitations, still got some, but I've overcome a lot of limitations that most people are, and of course it is increasing, but most people are still thinking that they don't have anything to do with anything. They think God does it all. Well, that's one way of looking at it. But if you look at it like you're a child of God, and how would you treat your child? Do you want him to be limited, or her? Or do you want them to flourish, to become all that they can be? So, it seems that God needed some company, so he created us. But we've got, in order to be compatible to the one that created us, we've got to grow up. And we're in the process of doing that, and everyone is in a different place with that. But I just wanted to plant the seed for you that the creation is not finished. We are involved in the creation process. We are involved. We are evolving. I was talking to a fellow that I met at the YMCA who is a writer of theology, has his own setup and everything. And we talked a little bit. And so I just listened when he said what he said, that evolution has been disproved. And he gave the person or the people that disproved this, and so he's hanging on to that. So I didn't suggest that he was misguided. I said I'm learning to respect where a person is, and I know the difference between where he is and where I am. That's all I need to know. More and more, I'm focusing more on what I need to do this lifetime, and making these talks is a part of that. And I'm enjoying it, and I'm able to help more people this way, I think, than I prefer one-on-one, but that's a little hard to get to sometimes. And when I'm talking to somebody like at the YMCA, I go every day. When I'm talking to somebody, and there's usually not the time or the space, because there's usually other people around, none the time or the space for me to elaborate on an idea, so I can just suggest that they go listen to a particular video that I made. And one that I suggest a lot, the one that I liked for people to hear, is that the talk I did on us means U.S. means us, as in we are running the country. And another one I like for people to hear is that getting old is a choice. Just yesterday, there's a retired psychologist who made reference to me being delusional because he keeps calling me old. I said, well, you can do that if you want. I'm not interested. He said, you're delusional. And I said, well, I'm one of the few that are not delusional. Most of the planet is delusional. That's the reality of it. And I took the time and energy to open my eyes. I needed that. I grew up in church. And the reason I chose that avenue is because I needed to rise above religion, and so I needed to be in the middle of it so I could see it. And I did. So that was my particular apparatus for this lifetime. And I've risen above religion and also politics, because the strangeness of politics is just people playing games because they're looking in, and that's why I did the talk on U.S. means us as in we are running the country, because it's our combined thoughts that the government gets its direction from. So we are all involved. But as long as we're pointing the finger, you change to make my life better, then we're missing the point. So there's some talks that I've done that are valuable for people to hear, because most people have not given these things any thought. And I'm an observer. I see what's happening in my life, my community, and the world. And the one thing that I can do something about is this one. So I've tried to keep that in mind. And that's where my focus is. And I'm doing this talk this morning. I'm redoing a talk. I had a talk on Creation Continues, and I think more people listen to it than any other talks I've done. But it got lost in the shuffle with Facebook making some changes, and so the video got taken down or lost in the shuffle. So and that's my fault. I missed it. I had an opportunity to save all the videos, and I got most of them, but there's a few that I missed. So I'm having to redo some. And I don't make notes when I do these talks. There are very few notes. So I don't know what I'm going to say until I say it. And that's what I'm learning by experience. Because no matter how much I speculate, no matter how much I practice, I don't know what I'm going to say until I am saying it. And I don't like the canned speech. I've done that. And that's tedious. And it's productive. I've got a friend who does a real good job at that. But I can't do that. I just open my mouth and I'm speaking from the standpoint of what I've come to understand. And that's the only reason we're here, is to understand ourselves. And I've increased my understanding of myself and many other things. But I don't spend much time trying to be like anybody else. I went through that when I was young and dumber. So I just want to, if you haven't thought about this idea, then give it some thought and do your own digging. The good stuff is buried. That's another talk I did. So, but each person has to do their own digging, because the gold and silver is not, you don't find it on top of the ground most of the time. There are exceptions to that. But everybody has their own path that they're on, and we've all got to go to the same place. See, we moved out from being one out to the 144,000, and we've got to work our way back home. It's like the prodigal son, essentially. So that's what we're doing, and we're in the 5th day. The 6th day will be intuitive man. If you can imagine everybody operating from intuition rather than we're in reasoning man now, which is necessary in order to produce intuition, reasoning. And as I've already mentioned, a lot of people have intuition and gut feeling confused. They're not the same thing. And listen to the last talk I did. I elaborated on that a little bit. But people who have not had the good fortune of going to the School of Metaphysics and learning the structure of mind and the language of mind are limited in their views. And I'm thankful for the School of Metaphysics every day, because that's what I found that answered my questions that I needed answers to. And now that I've gone to School of Metaphysics, I understand why and how I was attracted to that. My own soul connected me with it, and I know that. So it would be to everyone's advantage if they could go to the School of Metaphysics, but most people are not going to do that. It's a lot of trouble, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's been the most worthwhile too. And I didn't make it all the way through. I stayed with the studies until. Now, I didn't know this until later on, but I stayed until I got what I needed. I didn't stay for the whole program. And I have to take my hat off for the people who are ready for that. And I appreciate those people. And I've got some idea what kind of effort it takes. And it's not, and most people are just not going to do it. But that's okay, because everybody is on their own timeline. And these talks, I hope, if you read my purpose at the beginning, not the beginning of this talk, but my YouTube channel, The Next Step, Winston Cunningham, look at the purpose of what I'm doing. I'm very clear about that. Because when someone who's in the process of a certain place in their own growth can benefit from something I'm saying, then this gives them a way to connect with it, and their own soul will do the connecting. I have to be involved in that. I'm not after being the most popular person on the internet. That's why I'm not interested in the podcast, because what I want to present would get lost in some discussion. And I'm not after trying to change people's mind. It may seem that way, but I'm offering what I have come to understand through my own effort to someone who is in a place to where what I'm saying could be useful. And that's the whole reason for me doing this. And I'm gaining a lot from it, and I hope other people will too. We've in the process of going we've gone through the different days of creation. We're in the 5th day now, going for the 6th and everything. But one thing I want to point out, or the main thing I want to point out, that we all inherited the ability to create. Now, if you haven't given any thought to that, then it's time to start doing some digging and find out. Our experience here is about finding out how we're here to learn to create, because we inherited the ability to create. But if we're just caught up in the physical only part of this whole thing, then may not be making as much progress as we could be. And the amount of progress a person makes this lifetime is subjective to that person. A person will step out and learn more about themselves when they are ready, not when I think they ought to be ready. Because I know what it took for me to get where I am, and I know what it took for me to find the School of Metaphysics, which had the answers that I had to have, and I did like Jesus said to do. I asked for it, but I asked specifically, and I asked with this understanding from the past. I didn't know that at the time, but I know it now. That I knew to ask within and not somewhere else. Now, that came from understanding I produced in previous lifetimes. I didn't know that at the time, but I know it now. And just in the last few years, I've been able to pull some stuff forward that's very valuable to me, and consequently to others as well. I've been able to pull some things forward that I didn't learn this lifetime, but I understand them. And I'm finding more of that. And I kind of had suspected that when I was a child, but it didn't make any sense. So I had to do the work to get to the point to where everything began to make sense. And the School of Metaphysics was the biggest part of that. But maybe the biggest part was me getting to the School of Metaphysics. Once I got there, they had it all laid out for me. I didn't have to read 1,000 books to know where to start. It was laid out. You do this exercise, do this. And they didn't tell me to expect this, but consciousness began to expand. And I'm reminded of what Einstein said, and I found an interesting video on Einstein. Somebody recorded it before he died, and it was put away for a good while. But he talked about the afterlife, that he'd come to through his way of doing things. And everybody has their own way of coming to this, and my way was I needed the know-how, the how-to that the School of Metaphysics provided. It was the exercises for me that concentration, undivided attention, concentration, meditation, visualization, recharge, which is the energization exercises. I won't go into that here. Because you have to be halfway through the beginning series at school to learn that for it to be usable and worthwhile. But at this point, I've been recharging twice a week, and I've just started doing it 3 times a week because I'm doing a little bit more now. And when I was still teaching at School of Metaphysics and directing, I was doing the recharge every day because I needed that extra energy. And now I was careful not to do it too often, because if I'm not prepared to use the energy that I'm producing, then it will cause chaos. And so I don't like the thought of that. And so that's why I don't do it every day. And if you want to know about that, then you can either go be a student at School of Metaphysics, even a correspondence study. And you'll be exposed to these things. But you're not going to be exposed to it in church. I can assure you that. You'll just be told what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do, and don't worry about the rest. Well, that's the good way to waste a lifetime, which most people are doing. And that's their choice, and I respect that. But I also respect the choice that I made. Like when the fellow yesterday mentioned something about being old. I said, well, you can have that if you want. I'm not interested. And while I'm talking about my age, in about 3 weeks, I'll be 82. And before my 80th birthday, I made plans for the next 60 years until I'm 140. That's my plan. It don't have to be anybody else's. But getting old is a choice. That's one of my talks. Because I understand that it is a choice. Most people think that somebody else is making all of their choices for them. I didn't ever buy that. Or I didn't buy it when I was able to think it through. Creation continues, and you are a creator, as well as me. So at some point, it will behoove you to learn about your creative abilities. And wouldn't it help at this point, and looking at what's going on in the world, wouldn't it help if a few more people had their eyes open? Mine are open. Creation continues. I'm Winston Cunningham. Thank you.